It's funny. My punishment when I was a child was actually going to my room. And the funny thing is, my room faced his little outdoor work area. So there were plenty of days that I would watch him do crazy stuff like bend wood, and I'd say, what is he doing? Why does he have hot towels wrapped around a piece of wood? And sure enough, a couple hours later, he would steam and bend, and I'd say, that's amazing. I should really pay attention to what he's doing. And there were so many times he did things like that I realized were lessons in life. He did things just the opposite of what most people did, and it always worked. So like if you said to him, I'm gonna go fishing today, and I'm gonna go for bluefin tuna, he wouldn't say to you, well, that's not very smart. He'd say, if I was gonna fish for bluefin tuna in the Hudson today, I'd use this bait. But good luck. And you know, he taught us a lot about life, how to do that. It's unbelievable the lessons that he taught us when we were kids. We had no idea he was teaching us lessons. We'd say, what is this old man talking about? But now, as an adult, I think back and I listened, and I'm glad I did. He used to tease us. He'd give us a piece of rope and tell us to tie a knot. So we'd tie the knot and we'd laugh and we'd joke, and he'd be standing there with his hands behind his back, and he'd tie it behind his back in about a quarter of the time that we could tie it. That is, if we could figure out how to tie it, looking at it, he could do it behind his back. Behind his back. So then, you know, he used to make us do weird things like count fish. What am I counting the fish for? Then you know the weight. Well, what do I need to know the weight for? Well, then you know how much you would need for a year for a family of 4. Well, I'm never gonna have a family of 4. And then I realized he taught us things like, if I could spend 2 hours in this river, I could feed a family of 4 for a month and just have fun. So he was an unbelievable man. I never forget, when we were kids, we used to get in one of the boats with him. And I mean, I was little. I'm 52 now, so I was little. And we used to go straight out from the Ossining Boat and Canoe Club. And we'd go, and I'd say, why are we walking through the woods? And he'd look at somebody and say, that's the one. He'd pick the most perfect trees. To me, it looked like a twig. But once they cut it down, put it in the boat, stripped it, and did whatever they were going to have to do, it was a perfect piece of wood. So who knows what he made with all that stuff. But yeah, he taught me a lot about the river. The most important thing he taught me was time and tide wait for no man, so it's certainly not going to wait for a woman.
You were up on the dock, weren't you?
Mm-hmm.
But you see where that little bit of ramp is there? Now, right, it's built out there like a kind of a dock. Well, right near that, of course, is a shanty, but I think some trees have fallen down so that you can't see it. I don't think you can see the shanty. At least I can't.
Where was it on Croton Point that you used to live?
Oh, that's gone years ago. That was the old fish house, and that belonged to the Underhills. And then when their activity was lessons or they didn't fish, they had crews there. Then that's when my grandmother moved, and she lived there with her 3 children. And then later on, and she passed away, and then my father, he grew up, and he used to go quail hunting every winter down south. And he met my mother, and they got married, and they moved right into the old fish house, brick fish house. Of course, that's been torn down years ago. And that's where I come into being. Sad day for some people, I suppose, but that's where it happened. Now you see where that sandy beach is up there?
Yeah.
Well, there was a steamboat laid in there way back. A steamboat 100 and some feet long, and the slip was there. And today, you see where there's just a beach there. It's all filled in. Then there was a big coal yard there when I first came down here, and they used to bring the coal in barges, and they anchored pretty close to where that platform is. And they had a big shed there with machinery into it. They hoist the coal out of that shed, out of the boat, and into the cars that they had on the overhead run. And they used to dump the various sizes into the different bins there. Many hundreds of tons was there. So that's all done away with now.
Pretty close to Sing Sing here too, aren't we?
How's that?
We're pretty close to Sing Sing too.
Yeah,
aren't we?
close as I care to be. That's it, right down there. Yeah, I worked there as a truck driver. I worked there as a carpenter. When they built the hospital up on the hill, in this old powerhouse, I worked in there. And in the old cell block, I worked in that.
So you just want to sit down and see what it felt like?
How's that?
Just want to sit down and see what it felt
Well, I checked it out, but I made sure, everything was off there. I didn't know what the hell. I didn't want to get electrocuted. Not that I didn't deserve it, but I thought. When my father first came to Croton Point with his mother and two sisters, he marveled at the steam engines that they used for mixing the brick. And when he did get of age, he studied a lot. He went and took the examination, and over at Mount Vernon, when he come back, he had his license. He was an engineer. So he was given one of those engines to run. Well, I guess originally he was born in one of the Carolinas. I don't know, North or South Carolina. Why I say I don't know which one it was. I've heard him in years gone by speak about the experiences that he was used to seeing. As the fishermen then all went by sail and with oars to what they call the Outer Banks off of one of the Carolinas. And he said many of them never came back. They get caught in a storm out there and didn't have much control, so there were many of them lost. And so they called the Outer Banks them days, he said, the fishermen's burying ground. But then he come to Croton Point as a boy, as a young boy with his mother and the two sisters. The mother, she worked for the people that owned Croton Point, the Underhills, and then he also had a vineyard on this side of the point that was all vineyard. And then, I don't know how it is today, because it's many years since I've seen it, but I guess they've closed the wine cellar that was in the side of the hill.
Actually,
well, there was wine in there when I was a youngster, and I guess he exported the wine, and he had apple trees there that he raised apples, and he used to ship them to England by a clipper ship. And then they sent the brick out. They loaded the brick, a deck load, and they went on the schooners. There was no motors much in them days, so they shipped, everything was by sail. So the old spot where the schooners used to tie up to be loaded, I don't think there's any sign of them there now. I think they built a seawall there out of sheet piling. So there's not much evidence of that there anymore. Tell me, although the brickyard was still in operation when I was big enough to go over to the point sometimes with my dad after we moved over on the Croton River. And we used to, where you see the dump there now, it's all covered, there used to be a maze of creeks. And you could row from the Croton River down under the bridge, because the railroad was there then, and go through these bunch of creeks and come over to where the road crosses by the bathing beach. And then he used to tie his boat to a tree and walk a short distance away, and that was one of the engine houses that he worked in. I remember once in a great while he used to go over there with my father, and he used to lift me up so that I could blow the whistle, to wake the men up. And the trouble is, when I got a hold of that whistle cord, I wouldn't let go. Because I never was interested in that like he was as a boy. So I was just interested in this water here. That's why I grew up to be such a dummy, in school. I never thought much about the lessons. I used to think about this river, how to make a better net and all that kind of stuff. The old Crotonville School, that was a one-room schoolhouse. And of course, I never went to school on the point because I was too young when I moved away from there, but they had a schoolhouse on the point. The schoolhouse that I went to is still in existence. I think some unit has it. No, it's not the Eagles. The Eagles is at the church. There's a church right near too. And by the way, that was the only church that I ever knew. I was confirmed there, and I became a member of the church after I got old enough, and that happened to be the only church that I ever knew. I wasn't married in that church. I was married in the Episcopal, in the Methodist church, and that's Episcopal. But never made too much difference. They didn't miss me much anyhow, I guess, even though I didn't go. But she was a member of that church, and in fact, that's where we got married. That's what I always tell people, that we only had one argument during our married life. She died in 1979, and we were married in 1927. When we were coming down the aisle after the marriage ceremony was performed, she said that I stepped on her train. I said it was her father, and that's the only argument we had all the rest of our days. But as a youngster, when up in the country, we used to, in the winter, we were great for sleigh riding. And when the ice got good enough, all the ponds and things were frozen, we used to go skating. And that was about the main thing. There was no television or anything. Or I think the first radio I ever saw was after I got married. You didn't have none of that in the country. And they had kerosene lamps until, well, I guess I was a pretty good-sized boy before they had electric lights in the house. I always think about that. When I was 15 years old, I was going to the old HUDSON High School, and I wanted to get a hunting license. Well, you had to be 16. So I walked up to the town clerk's office. The clerk says, "What can I do for you?" I just come on my way home from the high school. Oh, I said, I'd like to get a hunting license. In those days it was hunting, fishing, and trapping. It had a big button that you put on it. And I think it cost $1.25. He said, "How old are you?" I said, 16, and to make sure that he understood the age, I said, and the telephone number, and you call my father, and he will verify my age. And they had one of those, the receiver, you had to take the receiver off the hook, and I don't know. So he said, what's the number? So I said, 229R, I think it was. He said, my father's home. I said, you can call him. Well, no, I don't know whether the guy who was calling my bluff, whether he intended to call or not. He might have had his finger on the hook, I don't know. So he gave up the number. I said, I better get out of here because I know that my father's not going to verify anything. So in January, which was my birthday, it was 7th of January, I made sure that I'm going to get up there and get that license. So I went up and the same man was there. How old are you? I said, 16. He said, your birthdays come pretty often, don't they? Yeah. Get used to lying, you don't mind it. Oh yeah, I've been all over this riverfront with the automobile. Yeah, we used to get on at Croton Beach, at the Croton Point Beach, and knew the superintendent good. He used to leave the gate open and he used to drive right across the beach, out on the ice, and go out to the channel, cut the nets out, and left them. That was, I think, one of the years was 36. Well, we fished since then, but I just don't recall because it's been quite a while ago since they ever had ice enough to do that with. And then they outlawed the taking of the striped bass. And that was what we was fishing for, see? So that killed that. And then, of course, this fishery here, where I fished out in the deep water for shad, that was altogether different, see? That is still legal, but the bass have become so numerous that the guy that's down by the bridge, Tappan Bridge, he at times has to take his nets out of the water because all he's catching is bass, and he can't sell them, so he has to throw them overboard. And so his men, he's paying his men for nothing. In fact, I was talking to him last night. He's crabbing now. I didn't say crabby because, most of these guys have been crabby all their lives. Well, it's my understanding, of course I don't believe it, that they have this, I don't know the actual name of it, but it's known as PCBs, that's the initial of it. And they claim that it could cause cancer and that it could cause bad births, and they have never proven it, but that's the theory that they go on. And by so doing, they banned us from taking the striped bass. So they may got numerous reasons, but none of them amount to anything. Now, for instance, at one time they said that the striped bass were so contaminated with this PCB business that, that was on the north side, that's from the Tappan Bridge north. They're very bad. In fact, so bad that if you really looked at a striped bass paid too closely, you would have to go blind or something happened to your eyes. But once they got down to the bridge, and they went under the bridge, so that they're south of the bridge, all right. Now, if you can tell me how that makes any sense, I don't know. But that's what the smart guy said. I don't know if I told you about this. I was in the court as a witness to an automobile accident. And I don't know whoever told the judge, or spoke to the judge, and it told him that I was a fisherman, commercial fisherman. So he says, Mr. Gordon, he said, I understand that you're a commercial fisherman. I said, yes, I've fished a bit. So he said, you catch shad, lots of them. Do you eat them? No. I knew what he expected me to say. The reason I didn't eat them, I said, too many bones. I said, I can't eat them things. I said, I eat the roe. Now he said, how about striped bass? He said, do you catch striped bass? Loads of them, I said. Do you eat them? Oh, yes, I said. So, how old are you? Oh, at the time, maybe I was 85. I don't know, I just forget. So he says, how long have you been eating them? All my life I've eaten them. Well, he says, it don't seem to have affected you so much. Oh, I said, I can only see one ill effect that has come since I've been eating these fish, is what's that? I said, I'm a little bit feeble-minded. I said, other than that, everything's okay. He probably agreed with me, but he didn't say nothing. The First World War, I was in high school, and I was too young, but they started giving us military training. I had an Army officer there. And of course, that became a nuisance. Once a week we had to do it. So I says, I got to find some way out of this thing. So then they'd say, I forget just the command now, but I think it was about face, and then to march to the rear. Well, the rest of the guys would be marching to the rear. I'd still keep going ahead. So finally, he began to excuse me for, for a couple of weeks at a time. And after a while, he threw me out altogether. That's all I wanted. Yeah, it took up too much of my time. And then the Second World War, I was too old then. I had a family, and when they went down to the place where your induction center, he said, what do you do? Oh, I said, I'm a commercial fisherman. Oh, he says, well, he says, we can't take you because the work that you're doing is much more valuable than your presence in the military. So you keep right on fishing. That was I was out of that. So that's one good thing that I got out of being married and being a fisherman. See, that helped me. Then we used to get gas. A lot. There were a lot of gas, to run the boats and to operate the little truck that we used to run fish to the market. Never used that very much, but we got the allotment for the gas, and of course I couldn't use it all, so I used to go up and deposit it at one of the gas stations. And somebody come along, and they needed some gas, but they couldn't get it. I used to write them on a note. You go up to such and such a station, and of course you got to pay for it, but you can get the gas. It was a kind of a hidden affair, but you knew it for the simple reason that when we sent fish down there by truck, the unloaders, which you had to use, and they got so much a box for unloading, and they would accidentally, but on purpose, drop one of the boxes and it would bust open, and then someone wanted a couple of fish and this one wanted a couple, so they distributed them out at your expense, see? Well then, I remember I was down there one morning and there was a restaurant upstairs over one of the stands, and I guess they had a grudge against this guy. They come down and shot him sitting at the table. But I wasn't present. I wasn't in there at the time. But they kind of ruled the roost down there. They got to the place where if you went down, they would charge you. If you were a buyer, they charge you for parking on the street. You had to pay a fee. I used to go down there once in a while with a man that had a fish market, and one time he'd go around, he'd buy from the different stands, and then he would tell him he wanted it delivered, say that at 7 o'clock or whatever time, and his truck was in such a place, and they were supposed to deliver it there with the hand trucks. One time, this fellow went with the hand truck to deliver the fish. There was no truck there. He says, John, he says, there's something wrong. He says, your truck isn't, don't tell me. He said, here's the key. Well, he says, come with me, show me where it is. Went there and the truck was gone. And here he had the keys and had the truck locked. Come to find out, he hadn't paid the last time to the racketeers. He hadn't paid them the money. So they just hooked the truck onto him and dragged him down South Street out of the way. But they had their ways down there. Yeah, it was a tough place. And you didn't dare get in a fight with them because they carried them hooks around their neck, that they used to pulling bales and stuff on. They'd have one of them in your head, so you knew better to bother them people. They looked like anybody else. They looked like just workers around the market. Well, I sent a friend of mine, and he had a little truck, so I said, well, maybe you can run these fish down, because we was getting quite a few fish at the time. It was we used to put 125 pounds of fish in a box, and well, I say 125 pounds. I used to always leave enough in there, 3 or 4 pounds overweight, so as to ensure that they're going to be the right weight, and ice them and everything. So this morning, he goes down, he took the fish down there. So one of these gangsters, he walked up to him, he says, say, are you in the union? No, he says, I'm not in the union. Well, he said, you better take that truck out of here, he says, because he says something's liable to happen to it. So he let them go that time, and that guy wouldn't go back no more, because they told him, he said, we'll run your truck right off in the slip, he said. So he quit that. So we had to ship with a regular registered truck. I used to go down there often enough, so they'd call you by name, and they knew you. And they knew you were when you were a stranger too. When I was running down myself, I used to go down Broadway, then right straight down until I get to, let's see, the Fulton Market was at South Street. And then I used to, know we wouldn't park in certain places, even after I had brought maybe some fish down that time, maybe some eels. And I'd unload, and then we pull away from there and go up on one of the side streets. But they got to the place down there that they was a trailer load of stuff, and they would say like lobster tails and such things. They hijacked the truck, take the truck and the trailer with them, go off and leave the driver off somewhere uptown, and then unload the truck and leave it there. Yeah, they really ruled the roost down there then. Then I can remember there was on the Beekman Street Pier, all of the fish that were brought into the market came in by boat. Even, down east or in the south, they brought them up there. And there was an old guy, he had a little shanty on the dock. And the truckman they would buy a load of fish from a certain boat. So the guy would be unloading with a hand truck. So he'd bring him up and bring him to the different stand where he was where he was working out of. So this old guy, he stood out there in front. When the fellow come by, he knew him by name. He said, "Oh, Jim, what do you got on there today? He says, cod. He goes over and sticks his hook into one of the biggest ones. He says, yeah, that's a nice looking fish. He said, okay, go ahead. But he dragged one of the cod off. And he had them big, tall bushel baskets. And he'd keep dropping the fish in when he got it loaded, and take them off and peddle them. But the man who bought these fish, he bought supposedly 300 pounds of fish, but he didn't have no 300 pounds when he got to his place of business. But he stood for it. I guess it wasn't, as I say, they had to control the market. There wasn't much you could do about it, I guess.
When Daddy started working in the city, he said he had to have a seat on the train that was on the side of the river. And he said every day he hated the train more and more, and he wanted to get off. But anyway, eventually he did.
I went, in early years, I had put in one spring fishing. That was in 1920. And then I had taken an examination for the post office as a clerk. And I couldn't, so they wrote back and they said, if there is no opening in the post office, would you take a job in some other branch of the government? Oh, I never thought I'd hear anything from them. I said, sure. Don't you know, I bet you it wasn't a month afterward I get a letter to make my appearance at the U.S. Customs. Oh, I was sick as could be. I had to ride down past here from Harmon Station, ride down past here to Grand Central, and then go on downtown. And I see some of the guys would be out fishing, some of them would be duck hunting. We'd say this is in September and October. I would be sick then. I had no desire for this job in the first place. And I'd have a bad feeling all day long, and then I wouldn't start to feel good until I got out from underground in the Grand Central and I'd come out on top. Then I kind of felt like at home. Could ride up on the riverside so I could see the river, and then I'd walk from Harmon Station over to my home. And if it was in the fall, I used to have my gun in the corner and my hunting coat and stuff. And I changed. My mother had my supper on the table. I'd eat my supper, swallow it down whole, put on my boots, grab the gun, go out on the river, and sometimes I'd kill a couple of ducks, and if I did that, why, I was happy. I'd come on back home, and my day was fulfilled then. That was supposed to be a very good job. That was the war was still on. And some old-timers worked there in the customs, and I told them, I said, this is not for me, I'm quitting this job. Oh, this is a good job. He says, don't quit it. This is good, steady work, and you get a pension. It didn't suit me, but when they saw that they wasn't convincing me to hold the job, they said, well, I'll tell you what you do. Go up to the appraiser, tell him that you want to leave. You want a leave of absence to go back to school. He's a great man for education, so he will grant you. So I went up to the gentleman and I told him what I wanted. Well, he says, I tell you, he says, we will grant you this leave, but you got to come back within 1 year. Work a day, and you can be reinstated, and we can release you for another year. Well, I had no intention to come back anyhow, but that was the rule, so I went by that. I walked away from that place, and like a great weight had fallen off my shoulder. And I never looked back, and I've never been back since.